The material for this lecture comes from chapters 15 and 16. As always, for the quiz, make sure that you read the material carefully. Well, we are looking at the mind-body problem in these two chapters, as well as in the next lecture. And I want to briefly begin by explaining the problem. Poyman mentions in your textbook that common sense would tell us that there are two basic types of reality. That is, a material reality and a mental reality. The material reality is the physical, three-dimensional world of time, space, matter, and energy. This is the world that we experience with our five senses: taste, touch, see, feel. This would be your material brain, your body. So the mind-body problem, the material world, is the body side of the problem. The mental reality is the non-physical world that is not extended in space or time. So the mental reality would be the reality of your experiences, of your sensations. And so in the material world, we might state the problem this way. There is your human brain, and if you stimulate the brain physically, however you stimulate it, we know that it will cause you to have certain mental sensations. So we know, for example, that brain damage will lead to some form of mental damage. We also know that if you were to, say, step on a nail, so this would be a physical thing, a physical act that is happening to your foot, it will, in the same way, cause you to experience mentally pain. So we know that the material or the physical world in your body will cause certain mental states. But we can also think of the interaction working the other way around. So I might consciously think about raising my hand. And so when I use my mental abilities to think about raising my hand, my mental abilities can actually cause my material physical body to move, and thus I will actually raise my hand. So it seems like the interaction between the mind and body goes both ways. Our material body can influence certain sensations in our mental experiences, and yet at the same time, our mental experiences can influence certain actions in our material body. So here would be the big questions that help articulate what exactly the problem is. So if the material and the mental are two different realms of reality, then where does the interaction between the two take place? Or how does such interaction happen? So if the mental world is not in the space-time continuum, it's some other realm, then where does the interaction happen? Well, it wouldn't be in the material world because by definition, the mental world is outside of the material world. But likewise, where does the interaction happen? The material world, by definition, is inside the time-space continuum. It is the time-space continuum. So where would that interaction take place? Is there a third realm? How do we work out this problem? How is it that the mental influences the material? And likewise, how is it that the material influences the mental realm? So there are four basic positions in philosophy when it comes to the mind-body problem, and these are just very general overview. But you have the materialist monism, which would argue that when it comes to this problem, the body is all that exists. That is, the material world is all that is, and so what we experience as mental states really could be reduced down to some sort of physical brain states. And so how do the two interact? Well, all there is body, and so there, in theory, would be no mystery there. There's also the dualist position that says the mind and body really are two separate realms, so there are two distinctly different types of reality. And then the mystery is, how do the two interact with each other? There are different theories for how that interaction takes place, or different ideas. A third position would be called epiphenomenalism, which argues that there is a mental realm, but the two are very much connected. And in fact, what distinguishes epiphenomenalism from dualism is that in the mental realm, if you destroy the body, that is, if you destroy the brain, the mind would go with it. So the two are so closely related. And in fact, the brain is primary, and the brain uh, produces the mind, it produces consciousness. And without the brain, there wouldn't be any consciousness or any mind or any mental realm at all. So dualism argues that in theory you could destroy the body, you can destroy the brain, but if you do that, the mind would still exist separate from the body. And then the fourth position is the idealist monism. This was the position of the philosopher George Berkeley, who argues that in all reality, there is no material world. All that exists is the mind, the realm of sensations, the realm of experience. This would be sort of like a matrix type mentality. There is no physical world outside of my thoughts, outside of the mental realm. We make them up in our own mind. And so if you notice on the materialist monism versus idealist monism, both argue that we can solve the problem by negating one or the other. The materialist says there is no mind, all there is brain. The idealist says, well, there's actually no body, all there is mind. So that's just a brief summary of the different positions and how people try to interact with the mind-body problem. So we'll briefly walk through those, just explaining it. Really, what you'll need to do in this chapter is, or in these two chapters, is make sure that you read the material closely. But we'll start with the materialist monism, which comes from chapter 16. But in short, this position says material brains are all that exists. And so here's how our mental life could be conceived. So right now, the thoughts that you have right now, as you're watching this lecture, really reduce to your brain. And so you have brain state 1 right now, and that brain state 1 is producing the sensations that you have right now that you call thought. Now, brain state 1 could move into brain state 2, and so maybe right now you're getting bored by this lecture, you're getting, really enjoying this lecture, and you start thinking about other things, either things that are related to it or things that are unrelated to it, but it's causing you to have different thoughts and different sensations right now. Well, those different thoughts and sensations would be called brain state 2. So how did you move from brain state 1 to brain state 2 to start thinking about other things? Well, it was an entirely material process. So there were specific laws of chemistry, specific synapses that have happened in your brain that are just operate based off of cause and effect, physical cause and effect relationships. And now you might have accidentally just now stubbed your toe, which causes you to experience pain. And so now you're in brain state 3, which is a sensation of pain. But this whole thing is a material process because the body is all that exists. Material brains are all that exists. So hypothetically, what you could do with this is, if you want to trace all thoughts and all sensations, if we were to discover, if scientists, neurologists were to discover all the details of the brain, they could in theory map out exactly what type of brain states cause what types of mental states, what types of beliefs, and all of our experiences, all of our sensations, all of our beliefs could be reduced to those brain states. So that is the materialist monist position. Dualism argues that there is a two-way causal relationship between the mental states that we have and the material body states that we have. So we might explain it this way. Brain state 1 can cause mental state 1 to take place. So if you stub your toe, that stubbing of your toe will send information from your nerves up to your brain, which will cause you to have a mental state of pain. But it's a two-way causal relationship. A mental state can cause you to physiologically do certain things. So, as I mentioned earlier, I could have the mental state of, I want to raise my hand right now. As I have that mental state, that idea, that thought, I can actually import causal relationships into my brain that causes my hand to rise. And then brain state 2 could cause mental state 2 to happen, whatever that might be, and that can cause brain state 3 to happen. But the big picture is that in the dualist understanding of the mind-body problem, physical states, material states can cause mental states, and mental states can have a causal relationship to material states in the brain. The third position, epiphenomenalism. One thing to say about this is a form of dualism, because it acknowledges that there are such thing as mental states. Mental states aren't just part of our imagination, they really do exist. But the difference between epiphenomenalism and different forms of dualism is that there's only a one-way causal relationship. So, you have brain state 1, that can cause mental state 1 to happen, but the mental state will never be able to cause anything to happen in the physical world. Now, brain state 1 can lead to brain state 2. So you stub your toe, that can lead to brain state 2, which in turn can cause you to have another mental experience. But the big picture here is, while brain state can cause another brain state to happen, it's never the case that the mental world can have any causal relationship on the material world. It's only a one-way causal relationship. The last position is the idealist monism. This argues, as I mentioned, that only non-material ideas exist. And so this would be, you have a mental state 1, and through mental state 1 you can cause mental state 2 to happen, and after that you can cause mental state 3 to happen. But there's no physical world, there's no the experiences that we have of a brain, of the material world around us, those are simply an illusion. As in materialist monism, the experiences that we have of the mental world are simply just an illusion. All that exists are brain states. Well, for the idealists, the material world is actually what the illusion is. All we have are mental states. So, well, that was just a very brief overview of chapters 15 and 16. Poyman also talks about a few other concepts and terms in these chapters, such as parallelism, where mental states and brain states are actually parallel to one another. This is also a form of dualism. He talks about panpsychism, which correlates to pantheism. He talks about behaviorism, reductive materialism, and other concepts. Those concepts can be found on page 173, so make sure that you read those, understand those before you take the quiz. Also look over all of chapter 5, that's materialist monism. I just covered it very briefly here, but you'll want to read those as well, as there will likely be questions on the quiz based on those ideas.